Vanilla Monster Hunter World is 4 years old. Darn. And it was a wild ride for all its active time. You can't even live the real experience of the Vanilla Monster Hunter World any longer because how almost every single update changed everything. Metas got created and destroyed with each release, and Gunlance seriously got to places with each one. Even the true 1.0 Gunlance was a wild thing compared with what Gunlance was before. Let's start with that. Part 1. The Dark Ages of the Gunlance. Gunlance always has been in a weird spot through the Monster Hunter series. Introduced in DOS, its concept couldn't be more simple. It is a slower but more powerful lance that trades the charge moves and the counters for shell attacks that ignore the monster defenses but is not affected by your attack rating. I'm using the strike style from Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. Basically OG Gunlance, you could only do this running attack then poke and use regular shells with Wyvern Fire as the final attack. And that was all. It was a very dull and clunky weapon to the point that got discarded in Monster Hunter Tri. The Team B aka Portable Team of Monster Hunter resurrected the weapon in the PSP Portable 3rd and gave Gunlance the Mayor template it followed for the following games until World. Gunlance gained 2 more moves, Charged Shells and the Full Burst combo, creating the holy triad of the Gunlance moves that have been kept instead until today. Charged Shells made each individual attack more powerful and made spending your clip more slowly, ideal for wide that also got bonus damage using them. While Full Burst served to upload all your shells quickly, ideal for the large clips of normal. Uncharged regular shells were used as a way to extend combos, allowing a chain string of pokes. This all in theory works great, but there were huge issues with the weapon and the shell's attacks. Full Burst was very slow to use, only could be done by before doing 2 pokes and then an also slow slam, and after doing it, you halted all action with a huge recovery time and no combo options after it. Charged shells also had big problems, like how the shell recoil quickly put you out of reach and how slowly you recovered shells. In these games, quick reload only recovered 1 shell of your clip and you literally spend more time reloading than attacking. And the shell damage was not too brilliant, lagging at the endgame of every single generation. For these generations, the general consensus was to forget about investing in shelling but use Gunlance as a worse lance in every single aspect, using shells to chain attacks and nothing else. The armor system sucked for Gunlance because of how costly it was to specialize in shelling if you wanted to max artillery damage, get capacity up and guard +2. You could perfectly forget about other skills in the high-ranked games. Then there were 2 other core Gunlance problems. Guarding was terrible at the endgame with monsters doing so much chip damage, and the lack of movement options outside the lunge moves. In the very last entry of the 4th generation, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, there was an attempt to fix things with the Valor style that included a lot of things that Gunlance needed, like loading multiple shells with the quick reload and a quicker access to Full Burst, but still the other core problems of the weapon stayed. Lack of good movement options. Even Blast Dash was impractical due to having cooldown and hefty startup and recovery times. Guarding still got you killed, and a skill system that punished going for shells. Gunlance was considered a general joke and only a few die-hard fans enjoyed it for various reasons. Myself fell in love with the 3U version and kept using it shelling only for all that time, but was sad not being able to recommend the weapon knowing that you are a second-rate hunter. And the new world changed everything from the very first moment. Part 2. The Gunlance Renaissance. It is hard to explain how exponentially better was Gunlance in World versus the older games. It is not only changes directly done to the weapon but also dozens of changes to the game, how monsters work and other mechanics introduced. It is ironic, but the biggest, more visible change to Gunlance at the end in the Vanilla version was the most meaningless of all. The Worm Stake Cannon was introduced here as a new finisher move that used a new special kind of ammo you only could get doing a full reload. It was back then 90% useless, the kind of move you only use once or 2 per hunt. The biggest reason is that the damage of the move was not enough to justify how long it took to use and reload it. Worm Stake biggest part of its damage are the ticks that are based on the shell level and can scale with attack, unlike shells. Problem is that base world's tick value was too low to be practical. Worm Stake became only useful in Iceborne with higher shell levels, to the point it became Gunlance's strongest attack. Also, the main reason why Worm Stake was not good is because every other move got huge improvements. Full Burst gained many ways to get access to it. You could slam after a lunge or directly upswing, and slam being much faster. Also, it was introduced the sweep move after the full burst. It was a high damage move that allowed you to keep attacking and chain full burst after full burst if the monster allowed it. Charged shells got 3 significant major changes. First, they moved the bonus of damage from wide to long and raised it from x 1.45 to x 2.1. The bonus compensated that long shells are weaker and then some more damage. Being long also allowed it to ignore the huge recoil for more time and made it easier to use. Then, they made focus work with charged shells so they were easier to use and also boosted its damage. And finally, quick reload did make you recover your whole clip. The full clip quick reload in fact is a benefit for all 3 types of shells. Full reload in world only exists for reloading the useless stake and to punish you for shelling after doing a hop. They could have replaced it with quick reload and nobody would have complained. Getting back to charged shells, there is also a 4th invisible change that people didn't know about until the game got released on PC. Charged shells got extra stagger damage. High damage numbers are important in Monster Hunter because they also make monsters stagger more easily. Long shelling did low damage and the monsters really felt it. I will get into this later. Even the previously only good to chain pokes regular shells got their buffs. First, they allowed you to evade after uncharged shells, something that in the past only was allowed for charged shells, making it much less clunky and safer. Being able to evade this easy makes it less necessary to use a shield for defense, and then the introduction of the poke shell combo. Now, you could throw a poke while a shell was recovering and the opposite. It made doing a combo of shell, poke, shell, poke, shell much faster and better than just doing poke 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 like it was the norm in the old games. Wyvern Fire stayed as your high recovery low use move, but like charged shells also got blessed with extra stagger that made it have a use. With smart timing you could right now chain staggers. These are the direct changes that by themselves would have served to catapult Gunlance into usable range, but as said, we got lots and lots of changes that also made them more practical, usable and fun. If I had to point the most important change in world, I would say the forward hop without thinking twice. This is what made Gunlance stop being clunky for good. In previous generations you only could hop to the sides or back and only once before a delay. This was changed to twice and in any direction. This hop also could be boosted with Evade Extender, making Gunlance fast enough for any kind of monster. Evade Extender is usually mislabeled as a quality of life or defensive skill. That is an error. Yes, Evade Extender makes attack easier to evade, but is not only that. Evade Extender is a movement booster that allows you to get closer to the monster faster and start attacking before. It has a clear impact on damage against any monster that doesn't stay in place. This stance right now is wild to think about it. Gunlance is no longer the slow-ass weapon you had to shelf all the time to chase the monsters, but you could do it and adjust to the flow of combat on the fly. I'm talking about a lot of skills like Focus and Evade Extender, where in the past generations you would have had to either have been blessed by a godlike charm or do hefty sacrifices to your damage, but one of the biggest benefits Gunlance got was the new skill system. As said before, in the Dark Ages getting Artillery +3, Load Up and Guard +2 would have been your whole build. Now it is just a few points. Load Up, now called Capacity Up, is just 1 point in the new system. Artillery +3 are 3 points and Guard +2 3. Armors in high rank could have from 3 to 4 points each, and you could have charms with 3 to all 5 points. They also removed the negative skills that only served to limit your builds. The result was that you finally had room to fit both melee and shell skills at once or pack your builds with countless utility skills. Gunlance greatly benefited because Artillery and Guard were level 1 slots, being the easiest to fit anywhere. I should not forget to mention that they countered the usual endgame problem of Gunlance by granting shelling an extra 20% damage bonus in high rank. It had the practical effect of adding an extra shell level, and it made a world of difference. Gunlance also greatly benefits from the mantles and tools system, being ways to boost damage and or defense without investing in skills. The affinity boosted paired with weakness exploit was 100% critical chance with just 3 points, and Rocksteady and Temporal Mantle were really busted. Oh, Rocksteady Mantle. The most busted thing this series has produced was not busted because of itself, it was because of the existence of the other mechanic that greatly benefited Gunlance, healing augmentation. There was already healing augmentation in the series in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, but was something locked after the very final boss in G rank and required several hits to activate. Here was more accessible and worked with each hit based on the MV of the attack, and with Gunlance it worked anomaly well. I will talk about it later, but basically with the right combination of gunlance, build and mantles you could face tank the most powerful foe for its duration, ignoring what the monster is doing. That is, if the monster even had a chance to attack. Gunlance boosted fixed damage paired with a new stagger system, especially on the following chapter. Part 3. The World Before Updates. January 2017. I could nickname this age as the Stun Fist. When World launched, there was an age of experimentation and discovery much larger than any other game before. Too many mechanic changes. Stuff like long being now the best for changed shells and focus working took some weeks to spread around. In this age there were only in general 2 gunlances used, Earthshaker Long 4 and Royal Burst Normal 4. Wide got shafted in only having level 3 shelling available, and playing without shells was almost unheard of. They will get the spotlight later. The general public love went to Royal Burst Gunlance and the normal type. Royal Burst was available before the final boss and the burst combo feels really good. In the endgame the weapon also was convenient thanks to the combination of Rocksteady and healing augmentation, where you can keep doing your combo ignoring hits and getting more use of it. Still, normal was and is the clunkiest and most unsafe of all ways to play Gunlance, and is the mayor responsible to perpetuate the fame of Gunlance as slow and clunky even if it was no longer the case. Normal players suffered a lot fighting against Diamond Ass Kieran. Long was used by a minority of players because it is the polar opposite of normal. You traded potential power for being better at everything else. Builds are easy to come with, and the long range has a curious effect on the AI since you are far enough to avoid melee attacks but not quite far for ranged. It is easy to exploit blindside attacks and do tactics focusing in the monster legs. High fixed damage in both meant that you could stunlock most Elder Dragons, rendering them useless. Some like Kushala were trivially easy since you only had to use 4 charged shells in the head to drop him, and you had time to throw 3 while was down, so hitting the 4th just when was up meant having him back to the ground and you could repeat the process. Same with normal, exploiting the white spikes of Nergigante that took extra damage and made him drop to the ground when destroyed. All this was very convenient for the act of grinding artillery decorations. If there was a stinky in the game, it was how long it took to get these and focus decorations. And a magazine decoration. A lot of pieces of armor became staple because of how rare their decorations were. Dodogama legs, Death Stench arms and artillery charm were overused to death. When the following expansion came out 2 months after the release, I was still without a single focus decoration and no magazine 1. Part 4. The Rise of Slaplance. And Palico Rally. End of March 2018. Deviljho was released in March 2018 and the community both rejoiced and screamed in horror at once. Some did the first and others the second. Deviljho was released alongside a strongest version with a different moveset named Tempered Deviljho, but was really more like the prototype that will be the Arch-Tempered monsters. Stronger with a lot more health and stagger resistance and hit zones all around. And also brought with him a very heavy-hitting Gunlance with insane rawness. These 2 factors together started to shrew light on the inadequacy of normal Gunlance in 2 fronts. The first was how bad normal is when Rocksteady weired out and you had to actually survive, and the second was the fact that normal was not that strong, and when attacking good hit zones, a good slam and sweep combo would outdamage it. Comes what would be called slaplance because of the lack of use of the gunning part of the Gunlance and how the moveset is more about slapping than it was about poking before. At this point also people started to complete their decoration sets and counter the bad affinity of Joes. The existence of slaplance is something that could be named a design flaw, where a combo gets stronger by skipping the supposedly stronger move plus also getting safer and using less sharpness. Normal will still keep popular for a while. Long style meanwhile got stronger because of the realization of how strong your Palico is after all, and how you could make room for Palico Rally once you got the basic decorations. It was determined that with Palico Rally an activation of the Wrath of Meath power could do by itself between 500 to 1100 damage on monsters that had about 9000 health. This made Long Style get a final power boost and be relevant in the post-Joe age. After several months things were getting stale, but we got a release that turned the game upside up. Part 5. The Search for Water. April 2018. Kulve Taroth was introduced in the middle of April, becoming the very first forced multiplayer monster in the series and brought with him countless weapons. This monster required specialized builds for fighting her. Guard up was a necessity since the constant fire carpet attacks and Partbreaker made clearing the hunt faster. Also being a forced multiplayer quest, having a wide range helped a lot. Urge-on armor got a lot of love this time. The highlight of the relic weapons was the Rarity 8 water gunlance, the very first wide 4 gunlance that finally made poke shelling possible. But was not the only one of mention. Gunlance is a fun weapon in that when you focus on shelling, the less rarity the better, and we got Rarity 6 versions of the long and wide 4 gunlances. There was also a R7 wide 4 that was more like a consolation prize if you couldn't get the Rarity 8 one. The blessing of Rarity 6 is that allows you to slap 3 healing augmentations and benefit from an insane amount of healing. The Rarity 6 long gunlance also got a hell of a lot more of sharpness than Earthshaker. In this expansion, Earthshaker was put into rest for good. Thanks for your service. Culve's worst thing was being a time-limited event that would return after a few weeks, leaving you with the weapons you were able to grind. I got unlucky here and ended with the Rarity 7 bomber gunlance. And still rocked. This became the age of wide gunlance. In power was between long and normal, but outplaced most of the time normal because how fast and easy to use it was. Normal and slap only did shine in the monsters that stayed in one place flaying helpless, while wide worked on everything and was more fun to use, requiring reflexes and observation of the combat. I basically only played wide from this point forward since I was sick of it long after months of it, with the occasional hunt for the heck of it. Part 6. The Atemporal Empress Armor versus the Reign of Arch-Tempered Monsters. June 2018. Enters Lunastra. After the power creep that was called weapons that basically ruined the difficulty of the game, Capcom countered with Lunastra. Lunastra was stronger with the worst hit zones you can imagine to the point of weakness exploit. The backbone of melee builds was useless. Gunlance of course had a field day with her since the stagger point of her were the legs and you could shell at those all day long. She bruff with her 2 game changers, the Empress Armor and Temporal Mantle. Temporal Mantle was a cheat. Even better than Rocksteady in that it allowed you to ignore enemy attacks. To the point of having the honor of being the only one mantle nerfed in Iceborne. The Empress Armor on the other hand was unbelievable. Lots of slots and native skills like Evade Extender and Health Boost, so you could now have those without sacrificing anything at all. The head and legs pieces became best in slot for every single gunlance build. I seriously even had a hard time replacing these in Iceborne until the post-game. With this, the gunlance meta got set in stone for all its life until the release of Arch-Tempered Kulve Taroth. The Arch-Tempered monsters truly changed more how people played the game than the equipment themselves. Made health boost mandatory, and normal was totally abandoned because you can't use it when the monster basically carts you with the most minimal mistake. Long survival capacities made it the best weapon when you want a 100% clear chance, while wide was the most used weapon because of how much adaptable it was. Slaplance still got used mainly against monsters that were easily stun-locked like Arch-Tempered Kushala or Zeno G Eva, but in general mostly only speedrunners used it since the risk/reward compared to wide was not there against the DLC monsters. I should also shortly mention that aerial gunlance became a thing around this time. Aerial gunlance consisted in basically searching for a ledge and using backstep and slam over and over thing that was the highest damage gunlance can get. Of course this is just a tactic for speedrunning and has no practical use in real-world hunts. The biggest game changer on viable weapons were Extreme Behemoth and Ancient Leshen. Against these, the only viable weapon type was wide. I never have seen anybody claiming to have beaten the monster using normal or slaplance, not a single time. I heard about someone clearing it with a long but never verified it and can't find any footage. But as a testament of how viable shelling has become in World, I was able to solo both with the R6 wide 4 gunlance only using artillery and magazine as damage skills, focusing on utility skills. I still set this as my more prideful monster hunter moment in my life. And sadly these experiences can't be replicated exactly like they were before. Final part, water versus water and how Iceborne messed with the original experience. Arch-Tempered Kulve didn't have the same impact that the original Kulve had. Most new gunlance were side grades at best. The armor had some nice pieces for melee combos but nothing too major. We got a new bomber R8 gunlance that was interesting but not too much useful for the Arch-Tempered, extreme monsters, and most interesting a new water gunlance that actually made water element builds viable. In the end we had that weird situation where the best all-around Gunlances had water in the name. But it was about time that base world was about to end. Arch-Tempered Nergigante was the final content update in May of 2019, more than a year after World got released, and frankly, I was totally satisfied with the game. The final picture was a pure domination of wide. Slaplance and normal were reduced to die hard, and speedrunners and long had still its place as the easiest to build and used for those who wanted to have a good time in the opposite spectrum. I like how every play style had in the end its moment of spotlight, but dislike how hard it was to use anything other than wide and long for normal grinding routines. Current base world experience in 2022 is like a totally new game. Because of how the patches work, a lot of changes introduced in Iceborne got into the core game. By example, Long got a 10% extra damage bonus and got quicker charged shells. Monsters got an animation named Clagger that replaced normal staggers, making them step back out of the range of attacks. Palico got some reworks making them a bit worse and got fixed a bug about infinite criticals and so on. If you play World with Iceborne purchased, you also get access to Wormstake Blast and Clutch Claw, if I aren't mistaken, that also make things different. Old Monster Hunter World is long done, and this video you have watched is nothing but my memories of them before they fade out. Rise might be the best Monster Hunter game ever, but nothing will change how Capcom managed to keep World fun to play without stopping for more than a year straight. Long live Monster Hunter World!